I think we should get
Aye.
started because I usually only have like one little like post-it of notes, but I have four this time
Whoa.
because it's a comedy scene where Mercutio and Romeo get into a literal battle of wits, and it's just joke after joke after joke, and none of them make sense without context. So we're gonna have to go through it. So that might take some time, but that's all right. It'll be super fun. The comedies always take more work, ironically. I think people think that they're going to be more fun because it's jokes and whatever, but they actually are, in my opinion, a lot harder to understand because we're missing a lot of the context. But we'll give you
Comedy
the
jokes.
context. Who would like to be Mercutio? Okay, Drew. Who would like to be Benvolio? Annette was the first one. Who would like to be
Too slow.
Wow.
too slow? Who'd like to be Romeo? Darian, the nurse. Marat. And Logan, would you like to do the honor of being Peter?
Sure, I will be Peter.
Awesome.
I thought we were
Nurse
talking about Peter
and
Griffin.
her man, Peter.
Peter.
Great. And I will be the narrator slash stage directions. As always, Romeo has stayed up basically all night. He went into the courtyard, talked to Juliet for a little bit, then went to Friar Lawrence's place. I almost said Friar Tuck. He went to Friar Lawrence's place, talked it all over, figured stuff out, and is now finally like kind of walking on his way home. He's been up for so long. And this is when he runs into his friends, Benvolio and Mercutio. They're going to assume that he was with Rosalind, because where else would he be? They don't really know about Juliet yet. And then eventually the nurse and another servant, Peter, are going to run up and tell us some news. But we're going to start with just Benvolio and Mercutio.
Where the devil should this Romeo be? Came he not home tonight?
Not to his father's. I spoke with his man.
Why, that same pale, hard-hearted wench, that Rosaline, torments him so that he will sure run mad.
Tybalt, the kinsman to old Capulet, hath sent a letter to his father's house.
A challenge on my life.
Romeo will answer it.
Any man that can write may answer a letter.
Nay, he will answer the letter's master, how he dares, being dared.
Alas, poor Romeo, he is already dead, stabbed with a white wench's black eye, rung through the ear with a love song, the very pin of his heart cleft with the blind bow boy's butt shaft. And is he a man to encounter Tybalt?
Why, what is Tybalt?
More than Prince of Cats. Oh, he's the courageous captain of compliments. He fights as you sing prick song, keeps time, distance, and proportion. He rests his minim rests 1, 2, and the third in your bosom. The very butcher of a silk button, a duelist, a gentleman of the very first house of the first and second cause. Ah, the immortal passado, the punto reverso, the hey!
The what?
The pox of such antic, lisping, affecting fantasiums, these new tuners of accent. By Jesu, a very good blade, a very tall man, a very good whore. Why, is not this a lamentable thing, grandsire, that we should be thus afflicted with these strange flies, these fashion mongers, these pardon me's, who stand so much on the new form that they cannot sit at ease on the old bench? Oh, their bones, their bones!
Enter Romeo.
Here's Romeo. Here comes Romeo.
Without his roe, like a dried herring. Oh, flesh, flesh, how art thou fishified? Now is he for the numbers that Petrarch flowed in. Laura to his lady was a kitchen wench. Mary, she had a better love to berhyme her. Ditto a dowdy, Cleopatra a gypsy, Helen and Hero, Hildings and harlots, Thisbe a grey eye or so, but not to the purpose. Signor Romeo, bonjour. There's a French salutation to your French schlop. You gave us the counterfeit fairly last night.
Good morrow to you both. What counterfeit did I give you?
The slip, sir, the slip. Can you not conceive?
Pardon, good Mercutio, my business was great, and in such a case as mine a man may strain courtesy.
That's as much as to say such a case as yours constrains a man to bow in the hams.
Meaning to curtsy.
Thou hast most kindly hit it.
A most courteous exposition.
Nay, I am the very pink of courtesy.
Pink for flower.
Right.
Why, then is my pump well flowered.
Sure wit. Follow me this jest now till thou hast worn out thy pump. that when the single soul of it is worn, the jest may remain, after the wearing solely singular.
Oh, single soul jest, solely singular for the singleness.
Come between us, good Benvolio, my wits faints.
Switch and spurs, or I'll cry a match.
Nay, if our wits run the wild goose chase, I am done, for thou hast more of the wild goose in one of thy wits than, I am sure, I have in my whole 5. Was I with you there for the goose?
Thou wast never with me for anything when thou wast not there for the goose.
I will bite thee by the ear for that jest.
Nay, good goose, bite not.
Oh, thy wit is a very bitter sweeting. It is a most sharp sauce.
And it is not, then, well served into a sweet goose.
Oh, here's a wit of Cheveril that stretches from an inch narrow to an ell broad.
I stretch it out for that word broad, which added to the goose proves thee far and wide a broad goose.
Why, is not this better now than groaning for love? Now art thou sociable, now art thou Romeo, now art thou what thou art, by art as well as by nature. For this driveling love is like a great natural that runs lolling up and down to hide his bauble in a hole.
Stop there, stop there.
Thou desirest me to stop in my tail against the hair?
Thou wouldst else have made thy tail large.
Oh, thou art deceived. I would have made it short, for I was come to the whole depth of my tale, and meant indeed to occupy the argument no longer.
Enter nurse and her man Peter.
Here's goodly gear, a sail, a sail.
Two, a shirt and a smock.
Peter. Anon.
My fan, Peter.
Good Peter, to hide her face, for her fan's the fairer face.
God you good morrow, gentlemen.
God you good e'en, fair gentlewoman.
Is it good e'en?
'Tis no less, I tell you, for the bawdy hand of the dial is now upon the prick of noon.
Out upon you. What a man are you?
One gentlewoman that God hath made himself to mar.
By my troth, it is well said. For himself to mar, quoth he. Gentlemen, can any of you tell me where I may find the young Romeo?
I can tell you, but young Romeo will be older when you have found him than he was when you sought him. I am the youngest of that name, for fault of a worse.
You say well.
Yeah, is the worst well? Very well took, in faith, wisely.
If you be he, sir, I desire some confidence with you.
She will indict him to some supper.
Abod, Soho!
What hast thou found?
No hare, sir, unless a hare, sir, in a Lenten pie, that is something stale, and whore ere it be spent. An old hare whore and an old hare whore is very good meat in Lent. But a hare that is whore is too much for a score when it whores ere it be spent. Romeo, will you come to your father's? We'll to dinner thither.
I will follow you.
Farewell, ancient lady. Farewell, lady.
Mercutio and Benvolio exit.
I pray you, sir, what saucy merchant was this that was so full of this ropery?
A gentleman, nurse, that loves to hear himself talk and will speak more in a minute than he will stand to in a month.
And he speak anything against me, I'll take him down. And he were lustier than he is, and 20 such jacks. And if I cannot, I'll find those that shall. Scurvy knave, I am none of his flirt gills. I am none of his skeins mates. And thou must stand by too, and suffer every knave to use me at his pleasure.
I saw no man use you at his pleasure. If I had, my weapon should quickly have been out. I warrant you, I dare draw as soon as another man, if I see occasion in a good quarrel, and the law on my side.
Now, afore God, I am so vexed that every part about me quivers. Scurvy knave.
To Romeo.
Pray you, sir, a word. And as I told you, my young lady bid me inquire you out. What she bid me say, I will keep to myself. But first let me tell you, if you should lead her in a fool's paradise, as they say it were a very gross kind of behavior, as they say. For the gentlewoman is young, and therefore, if you should deal double with her, Truly, it were an ill thing to be offered to any gentlewoman, and very weak dealing.
Nurse, commend me to thy lady and mistress. I protest unto thee.
Good heart, and fates, I will tell her as much. Lord, Lord, she will be a joyful woman.
What wilt thou tell her, nurse? Thou dost not mark me.
I will tell her, sir, that you do protest, which, as I take it, is a gentlemanlike offer.
Bid her devise some means to come to shrift this afternoon, and there she shall at Friar Lawrence's cell be shrived and married. Here is for thy pains.
Offering her money.
No, truly, sir, not a penny.
Go to, I say you shall.
This afternoon, sir? Well, she shall be there.
And stay, good nurse, behind the abbey wall. Within this hour, my man shall be with thee, and bring thee cords made like a tackled stair, which to the high top gallant of my joy must be my convoy in the secret night. Farewell. Be trusty, and I'll quit thy pains. Farewell. Commend me to thy mistress.
Now, God in heavens bless thee. Hark you, sir.
What sayest thou, my dear nurse?
Is your man secret? Did you ne'er hear say, two may keep counsel, putting one away?
Warrant thee, my man's as true as steel.
Well, sir, my mistress is the sweetest lady. Lord, Lord, when 'twas a little prating thing. Oh, there's a nobleman in town, one Paris, that would fain lay knife aboard. But she, good soul, had as lief see a toad, a very toad, as seen him. I anger her sometimes and tell her that Paris is the properer man. But I'll warrant you, when I say so, she looks as pale as any clout in the versal word. Doth not Rosemary and Romeo begin both with a letter?
Ay, nurse, what of that? Both with an R.
Ah, mock her, that's the dog's name. R is for the... No, I know it begins with some other letter, and she had the prettiest sententious of it, of you and Rosemary, that it would do you good to hear it.
Commend me to thy lady.
Aye, 1,000 times, Peter.
Anon.
Before and apace.
They exit. Yay.
No.
Woo.
Peter, no.
What does anon mean?
Anonymous.
It's
We
kind
shall
of just
rise.
like, all right,
It's kind of-
here we go. Like,
Yeah, it's kind of just like you might say, like, all right, let's
I
go.
saw. Oh,
No.
apparently means shortly. Ooh.
word.
Word. He's like,
It does not
anon.
mean It does not mean someone who anonymously posts to image boards.
I really
Anon.
thought it was 4chan. It was like, hey, anon.
Okay, so as I said, I have lots of notes. So what I would like to do is just kind of go through them, just go through them as a segment, and then we can kind of go in and talk more about the piece as a whole, just so that we can get all the context first and then discuss what's up. So
Okay.
there's a lot, as you've seen, lots of jokes that kind of don't make sense. Let's go all the way back up to the top. So we start, where's Romeo? He didn't come home. Oh no, I bet he's with Rosalind. And then we hear that Tybalt has sent a letter to his father's house. And then we get a little confused here. Challenge on my life, Romeo will answer it. Any man that can write may answer a letter. So what they're talking about here is that it's kind of like Tybalt has challenged Romeo to a duel. So the first step in having a duel is sending a letter. And then if you answer the letter, that means that you're agreeing to the duel. And so it's kind of like there's this challenge. We say, yes, Romeo will answer it. Mercutio then gets smart and is like, any man can answer a letter. But Benvolio's like, no, it's a letter for a duel. Like, stop it. There's a lot of insufferable jokes like that. It feels like the conversation can't go anywhere because somebody has to make a joke about literally everything that's said, which is why there's a lot of confusion here. So that happens. We talk more about how Romeo is, oh, he might do this duel, but he's already dead because he was stabbed with love and the blind boy's arrow, meaning Cupid's arrow once again. We ask, why, what is Tybalt? more than Prince of Cats. Tybalt is another word for cat. It means cats. So more than what his name is. What's in a name after all? So we are saying that he fights as you sing, prick song, keeps time, distance, and proportion. So this is referring to fencing, meaning like he fights as you counter. Prick song means counterpoint, so if like a harmony when you're singing. So it's like he fights as if he's singing, and he's saying that Tybalt is like a fencer. He's very fancy, but he doesn't actually like do real sword fighting. He's just like very gentlemanly about it, as if it were choreographed. So he references the very butcher of a silk button. There was a famous fencer in Shakespeare's day who bragged that he could like cut off a button off your shirt without harming you. So that's being referenced there. Okay, then we get some Passato, Punto Reverso, the Hey. Those were sword fighting moves there. Then Mercutio / Shakespeare through Mercutio goes into this big long speech against basically fancy foppish people of the time who are really into French. Like this man hates how into these people were to French. So he makes fun of the new turners of accent, meaning people who like took on an accent that isn't actually theirs, and then makes fun of him. So the actor would have put on like that accent when he was saying, "By Jesu, a very good blade," whatever. So it's how you might make fun of, I don't know, the upper class kind of people today.
Still.
Yeah. And then down here, the pardon me is actually, it would have been like pardon moi, like how you'd say excuse me in French. And then there's a word play down further about, oh, they're bones, they're bones. They would have pronounced it like bon, which means good in French. So it's like, oh, they're bones, they're bones. Yeah. So really this whole paragraph is like, aren't fake French people stupid?
And I mean, I will say this. As a broad stroke of a joke, talking about upper class teens who go to France once and think that they are suddenly very cosmopolitan, I think that's a joke that still holds up.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's like the people who come home or even just don't even go to France, but they still say filet mignon. It's like, all right, get a hold of yourself.
They could never eat a pizza again after going to Italy. It's like, oh my god, it's not the same.
Pretentious, arty people.
Yeah, I was definitely
were
that
just
person.
really
I was definitely
changed.
that
Like
person.
they actually studied abroad for a semester, and it just really opened their eyes.
Precisely.
I was definitely
So that's
that
who we're
person.
dealing with here. So then,
Like, how many of us did we just call out?
I think we just
Like
individually
everyone.
called ourselves out.
So we can joke about it because we've been there. We're over it now.
Yeah.
But
Oh, yeah, yeah.
It takes
Totally
no
us.
one.
That's
Joke's
like
on
saying
you.
I'm
I
a
didn't.
black
I
man.
didn't
Nobody-
have a free semester to go abroad because I skipped a year.
Yeah, graduated early.
That's right.
Had a whole year.
No
Think about, like,
time
how
to go to
shiny
no
you have.
castles.
Mm.
Who called you
Anyway, okay.
out?
So
Anyway.
Romeo enters. He is here. Reminder that his friends think that he spent the night with Rosalind doing dirty deeds. And so here comes Romeo. Mercutio goes, Romeo is without his roe. So if you've ever had sushi, you might know roe as fish eggs. So at the time, it also meant fish sperm. So he spent the night with Rosalind. He's without his sperm because he spent the night with Rosalind.
That's how that
So
works.
very nice. And that's why he's like a dried herring, because when they served herring back in the day, they would take out the roe before you ate it. So
Oh.
So then he goes off and talks about how he is for the numbers, which means like the poems that Petrarch, famous old poet, wrote. Petrarch wrote a lot of sonnets to a woman named Laura. But if Romeo were to see Laura, she would look more like a kitchen maid because he's so in love with Rosalind, as far as Mercutio is aware. And then he kind of goes through a lot of these famous old like classic women. So we got Dido. She was from the Aeneid. We know her from, we know the Aeneid, the Aeneas from the Iliad. He went on to the Aeneid. Oh my God, I cannot speak. Aeneas went on to the Aeneid, whatever. Dido was in love with him. After Aeneas left, she killed herself. Very sad. Cleopatra, famously also killed herself after her lover died. Helen, she's a standout. We know she didn't kill herself, but she was still in this very dramatic, complicated love story. Hero, that was actually a woman as well. She was in a Greek story in love with Leander. Leander drowned, and then Hero killed herself. And then Thisbe was actually an inspiration for the Romeo and Juliet story, in which Thisbe's lover ended up dying, and then she killed herself as well. So,
Wow,
do you
not a
think
great
this might?
track record.
Yeah, this might be
Wow.
foreshadowing, maybe, perhaps.
I don't think so.
Yeah,
Just ignore this little bit.
yeah, it's nothing. It's nothing.
There's nothing here.
Nothing here at all. Authors don't do anything intentional. So we get one more dig at French. Bonjour, Signor Romeo. And then you gave us a counterfeit. This is a pun on counter feint, which means just like duck away, you know, which might still be playing at like the sword fighting imagery that they were doing above. Romeo's like, what counterfeit did I give you? The slip. You slipped away from us. Can you not conceive? He really can't stop with the sex jokes. It doesn't stop. So then he goes on. Mercutio has him curtsy. He curtsies. And then Mercutio says, you have kindly hit it. I was like, another sex joke. And I was like, nah, that has to be too modern. No, the internet tells me that's another sex joke. You have hit it. Now we go into the most complicated part, because every word means something else that it doesn't mean today. So Mercutio says, I'm the pink of courtesy. Pink used to mean flower as well. So I'm like the flower of courtesy. I'm just like, whatever. And then Romeo goes, pink for flower? Right. Why, then is my pump well flowered? So by pump, he's referring to his dancing shoes that he's still wearing. And back in the day, there was a style of like perforating dance shoes to put like little designs on them, and that was called pinking. So he's making another step there on the pink frame. Then Mercutio goes, good job, sure witch. Now follow me on this joke here, and follow me on the joke until you've worn out your pump.
Oh my god.
And then when the sole of that shoe, that pump, is worn out, the joke will remain. After the wearing, it will be solely singular, because it will be alone and also without the sole of the shoe that you've worn out walking on this joke for so long with me. Romeo goes, oh, single soul jest solely singular for the singleness, which basically means, yeah, your joke is single in the way that it's very like left alone, because it is singled out because it's so single, and single also used to mean simple, like it's a bad joke. Simple. Ooh.
Super
then,
hot fire.
Oh yeah, it's just like too much, and unfortunately it doesn't stop there.
It keeps going and going and going.
Yeah, it's insufferable. So then he's like, Benvolio, please, I can't take it. This battle of wits, I can't. And Romeo goes, switching spurs, or I'll cry a match, which he's referring to horse racing, like hit your horse with a switch and your spurs, like, come on, keep going, or else I win, like, match, I get the match. Then Mercutio decides to say, no, if our wits go on a wild goose chase, I am done. Because you have more of the wild goose, and goose also means like jokes. Like you've got more jokes in one of your wits than I have in all 5 of my wits, which is what they used to call the senses. And then he says, was I with you there for the goose? Which basically means, was I even with you on that joke? Like, did you feel like I was matching your wits there when we were going back and forth? And then Romeo says, you were never even with me for anything when you weren't just there for the joke. Which does work. It works. It's all right there. So Mercutio straight up says, I will bite your ear for that joke. Which, whatever. Romeo goes, no, good joke. bite me not. Mercutio says, your wit is very bittersweet. It's a very sharp sauce. And then Romeo says, isn't a sharp sauce good for a sweet goose? Because cooking, wouldn't that be delicious? This goes on. We then get to the word broad, which actually means body. So that's why you might get in like older media, people might call a woman a broad, and that kind of means like, you know, like a whore sort of thing. So it's because broad, body, like it's all kind of tied up together. Broad also means rabbit. This is important for the next set of complicated jokes. So
how many sticky notes have we gone through?
We're on 3 now. Okay, so where are we going now? Okay, so they're joking, and then Mercutio goes, isn't this joking? Isn't hanging out with your bros much better than love?
Bros and banter before hoes.
Absolutely. He's like, aren't you having a good time now?
Mercutio's like, hey, isn't it good hanging out with your bros, biting each other's ears, no women around?
Yeah.
It's very like those images Marat was sending.
Yeah. No, we don't talk about this.
So he goes, now you're sociable. Now you're Romeo. You are what you are by nature. Okay. So now we get, for this driveling love is like a great natural that runs lolling up and down to hide his bauble in a hole. So natural was also slang for fool, but also like kind of like crazy homeless person type character. So that's one meaning. You're like a great fool that runs lolling up and down the street trying to hide his like little fancy trinket away. However, bauble also refers to like the baton staff that like jokers used to use to like do little jokes with, and also they would use it to make sex jokes with because it's kind of like phallic. So hiding a phallic thing in a hole, etc. You can tie it together. That's why Benvolio says stop. And that goes on for a while. So they do eventually stop this stupid sex joke stuff. And then Nurse and Peter run in, and they are both, it's early morning, so they are both in their like dressing gowns, which are white and like floofy. And Romeo goes, a sail, which I think is just a fat joke. Like she's wearing a big white garment and it looks like a sail. Yeah.
I was wondering what she was on.
What a dick.
Yeah. So Nurse runs up and she decides that she wants to act a little more upper class than she is. Basically because she has this really important mission and she's going to talk to Romeo and these really important people. So she might be a little nervous, but she goes up and like kind of acts like Peter is her servant, even though they're both more or less on the same playing field. She goes, Peter, my fan, oh, and she's like running and trying to like catch her breath. Mercutio's like, good, yeah, give her her fan because I like looking at the fan more than her face, and that is nicer for me. Yeah, they just immediately start dragging this nurse for no reason. Like she shows up and they're just at her, and she can barely get a word in edgewise. Okay, so they go, good morrow. They say, no, good evening. She goes, is it evening? Mercutio says, yes, of course, because the body hand of the dial is now upon the prick of noon. So the hand of the clock is on noon, but of course the body hand is upon the prick of noon. And yes, I did have to look this up, and yes, prick did mean dick even back then.
Nice.
So yeah, I don't know why he had to turn the time of day into a sex joke, but he did.
Everything is fair game for Mercutio.
Sexy times.
Yeah, he really does not stop. Okay, so then Nurse is like, I'm looking for Romeo. Where can I find the young Romeo? Romeo is like, doesn't like being called young Romeo. So he's like, oh, well, Romeo is older than you will have found him than he was when you sought him because we're all crawling towards death. But anyway, I'm the youngest of that name for fault of a worse, which he's playing on the phrase for lack of a better term, basically, like for fault of a worse. And then Nurse says, you say well. And she means like, you speak well, like you are well spoken. But she says, you say well. She uses the wrong word. She does this a few times. And then Mercutio cannot let it go. And he's like, oh, you said that he says well, but he said worse. Does that mean that the word worse means well? Well, you took that well.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, wow.
Yeah. So then the nurse uses the wrong word again. She says, if you're Romeo, if you be he, sir, I desire some confidence with you. She means to say conference, like I need to talk to you.
Oh, I was wondering that, yeah.
Yeah. So Benvolio is making fun of her and says she will indict him to some supper. Like she'll invite him to supper, but using the wrong word to make fun of her. Oh, she'll indict him to some supper. And then Mercutio goes, abad, 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 so ho. So we know at this point that bod means broad, means whore, means rabbit as well. So there's a lot going on here. So he's calling her a whore, like, oh, she's inviting him to supper to like sleep with him. And then also is like, so ho, which is what I guess rabbit hunters used to say when they saw a rabbit. So they're just dragging that in for fun. So Romeo's like, cool, what have you found, Mercutio? Because you said so ho. And then Mercutio says, no hair, I've not found a rabbit. Unless you mean a hare that is in a Lenten pie, a pie that you make in Lent when you're not supposed to eat rabbits if you're Catholic, but you made it in Lent, like to prepare to eat after Lent is over. But then by the time Lent is over, it's stale and whore, which means gray. You know what I mean? Because she's so old and ugly. That's what the joke is there.
Wow.
Yep. So then he sings a song and then leaves. After calling her an ancient lady.
After insulting this woman in every conceivable way.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So
Cool.
they leave. The nurse is like, oh, he's the worst. I'm none of his flirt gills. I'm not like a flirty girl who will think that that's impressive. I'm none of his Gaines mates. I'm none of his bros, you know. And then goes to Peter and is like, and why did you have to go and let them all just like attack me like that? I thought we were friends. And she uses another wrong phrase. She means to say, why did you let them abuse me as they please? But she says, why did you let him use me at his pleasure? Which of course sounds like a sex thing. And so Peter just jumps right on because no one can let this woman live. And he goes, you know, I saw no man use you at his pleasure. If I had, my weapon should quickly have been out. Great. As soon, I warrant you, I dare draw as soon as another man, if I see occasion in a good quarrel and the law on my side. Which could mean, you know, if I saw a man try to rape you, I would attack with my sword. It could also mean if I saw a man try to rape you, I would have been next in line. It's a good time. Yeah.
Not for the nurse.
Not for anybody.
Well, the only thing I'll say is if we assume when he says, and the law on my side,
Yeah.
I think I interpret it more as if I saw someone trying to force himself on you, I'd fight him off. But he's also saying, but I'd fuck you.
Let's take it like that.
That's a lot
Let's
better.
assume,
That's
since they
my
go
head
on to
canon.
being friendly coworkers after this,
Yeah.
that that's what he means.
Yeah, I would prefer that,
I
honestly.
mean, what you described, I would still consider to be sexual harassment.
I mean, yes.
But
it's
I'll take that over. I would be next in line to rape you, to be honest.
Yeah, that's rape.
That's
All right, what's
right.
next?
Almost done.
That's it.
Almost done.
What's
So-
next?
The nurse basically explains, my young lady Juliet made me come find you. She wants to meet up with you, etc. And then Romeo is about to say something. He goes, I protest unto thee. But the word protest, which actually initially meant to stand, like to say something in support of something, as opposed to like today we use it to like protest against something, but it used to mean for something. It was actually used instead of like propose. So when someone says I protest, it's basically like saying I propose. So she confuses that and thinks that he's about to say I'm gonna ask Juliet to marry me. And the nurse is like, oh great, I'm gonna tell her. Oh, she'll be so happy. And then Romeo is like, what do you mean? You didn't even hear what I want to say yet. You just cut me off. I'll tell her that you protest, which, as I take it, is a gentlemanlike offer. And then he's like, no. Tell her to meet me at Friar Lawrence's tonight, and then we'll be married. Just go away. Here's some money. He does mention later on that the nurse is going to meet up with one of his servants. The servant is going to bring her 3 cords made like a tackled stair, which basically means a rope ladder, so that he can get into Juliet's room at night. So his servant's going to make a rope ladder or buy one, give it to the nurse. The nurse is going to give it to Juliet. Juliet is going to Rapunzel it out of the window, and then Romeo will be able to get into her window at night. Great. The nurse has a problem with that a little bit. He's like, she says, is your man secret? You know, didn't you ever hear the phrase, 2 may keep counsel, putting one away, which is the same as 2 can keep a secret if one of them is dead. Are you sure that he's okay? Romeo is like, yeah, don't worry about it. Everything's fine. The nurse goes on a tangent talking about, oh, cool. Well, anyway, like, Paris is in town.
By the way.
Paris.
And then she says, Paris, blah, blah, blah. She mentions how he would lay his knife aboard, which is referencing how sometimes at a bar, if you want to save your spot, if you were back in the day, you would take your knife that you carry with you all the time and put it in front of a seat to kind of like reserve your spot.
Wow.
However, this is also taken
I wouldn't touch that seat.
Yeah, it's also taken as kind of a sex joke here. Like, he's putting his knife down in this spot, like Juliet, like keeping that spot for himself. So anyway, the last stupid joke that happens in this scene is that the nurse changes the subject a 3rd time in a paragraph and says, hey, don't Rosemary and Romeo begin with the same letter?
Yeah.
Romeo says, yeah.
R.
So I didn't get this at all, but the joke here is that she goes, no, R is for the, and then cuts herself off because she's about to say R is for the arse, which is how you say ass in England, because R is, like if you say R is really quickly, it sounds like arse. So then she's like, no, it has to begin with some other letter because R is a gross letter because arse starts with R. But she says, anyway, Juliet wrote some nice poetry about Romeo and Rosemary, and you should hear it. It's really nice. And he's like, okay, bye, I will. All right. And then they leave.
Where's Romeo's wit when the nurse sets him up like that? Like back with Mercutio, switch and spur. But then she sets him up with the dumbest thing ever, and he's just like, yeah, they do.
Since we're supposed to root for Romeo, I'm gonna just put forward that maybe now that he's not being influenced by Mercutio, he's not feeling so inclined to make fun of an old lady.
I was about to say the nurse has taken enough of the piss at this point. She deserves a little bit of a break.
It's so confused. It's like Oscar Wilde has this problem too, where every single person is so witty that they're constantly just setting each other up for these jokes. And it's like, why does the servant have the same level of humor and wit as the scholar who's been studying in his study all this time?
Well, I think the trick is most of the nurse's jokes, she doesn't know she's setting up. That's the fodder on which the others make fun of her. Is she's accidentally saying these things that are kind of funny.
Yeah.
Because I mean, even in the case of Romeo and Rosemary can't start with R because the lady wrote a really pretty poem about it, so it can't start with the word ass. I don't know if that's especially witty so much as it's just kind of a thing she's thinking.
I can't spell.
She definitely got roasted in this. This is what I would dare to call gratuitous on Shakespeare's part. This whole scene.
Yeah, it never ends. It's just one after another.
This is a filler episode for sure.
Yeah, I think you summed it up really well, Tina, when you said this conversation can't go anywhere because they just keep. It reminded me of a Reddit comment thread where
I was just gonna say Mercutio really sounds like a Redditor.
No one can talk because the first comment is a pun, and the second comment is like a reference, and then the third comment is a quote that everyone continues, and it's like, this isn't going anywhere.
And the first comment is like racist, and they have to clean it out.
The mods swoop in. Stop.
But I agree that the nurse there's no real reason. It feels a little sexist to me that the nurse is just okay. So if she's like the Karen of her time, then you can kind of see, like them making fun of a type of person that people like to make fun of, that may be kind of annoying, but she didn't do anything wrong except be nervous and misuse words and maybe try to act a little self-important. And Mercutio just like from Romeo, like Tina said, just calls her fat as soon as he sees her. And then Mercutio goes, "What'd you say? Did you just say that?"
Yeah, I mean, I guess my feeling with the nurse, the second she struts on that setup, you can almost picture that the nurse is being played by one of the Monty Python guys in their drag get-ups, Like, it's that same level of just, aren't old English ladies funny on principle, I guess?
Yeah, I guess.
Yeah, it is. I mean, and of course it would have been a man playing this role, which may or may not have played into that. I mean, it was a man, certainly, but that may have been like part of the joke there too. But really it's kind of like when they say like police brutality, like, oh, he was killed for walking while black. Like, she was attacked and like made fun of for appearing while female and perhaps overweight. Like, that's her only crime was existing.
Unforgivable.
Yeah.
I will give Shakespeare his due props where like the reading Mercutio's lines, they did not make any sense, but they were very fun to say. Like they had a very sing-song bounce to it, which felt intentional, but it definitely feels like a showing off moment and not like the story needs Mercutio to just, be that guy who can't put it away.
Yeah, but I guess if you figure that for the audience at the time, this was what they were, this is the 2-hour traffic. So like, if you're like, oh, we're going to go out for the day and this is our thing, throwing your tight 5 in the middle of your weird variety act play. Because I guess now we would think, well, this doesn't really serve the story. But if you think of this as, this is supposed to entertain just an audience for 2.5 hours. It probably doesn't feel like such a throw-in. I mean, it really does just feel like Shakespeare's like, let me do my tight 5, my stand-up set, get it ready.
I did like the slips or the slip. Can you not? That joke felt so modern that I was like, wow, I can't believe it was one of those moments where I'm like, I can't believe he wrote this so like 400 years ago because like. This that just felt very modern.
It was kind of fun.
Definitely, thou hast most kindly hit it.
Finally,
what? I know exactly what that means.
One thing I'll say that's, I guess, little bit meta funny, because earlier we were talking about Petrarch as a guy who wrote all kinds of romantic poetry, but Petrarchan sonnets were the first type of sonnet that was kind of imported into English, and then in Shakespeare's time changed to the Shakespearean sonnet that we know and maybe love. But part of it is in most of the circumstances where Romeo is really like going off and waxing really poetic, he's speaking in Petrarchan sonnets. Like, he is the Italian memishly romantic person who gets kind of invoked whenever Romeo's going off. So they're kind of specifically calling out the type of person who is really into Petrarchan sonnets in this case, but also in this chapter specifically, there is not a Petrarchan sonnet. So that's a little bit fun.
I thought their joking felt pretty realistic until the joke became look how well we're joking together, you and I. Oh, you got me. Oh, that joke really hit me in the joke heart. And now I'm bleeding all over the joke. Because when you joke with your friends and the joke becomes like, look how dumb our jokes are, you don't go like, oh, oh boy, man, we're really killing it.
See, but I guess part of the I think for me it's the fact of it's sort of that, but it's Mercutio more just going like, oh man, you're putting me on blast. I look like an idiot compared to you. You're so funny.
If you read it like completely sarcastically like that, like, oh wow, you're like so smart, Romeo. Whoa, like
basically just like
singularly soul.
No, it's like, oh nah, man, your joke is so much better than mine. You have more of the goose in one of thy wits, I am sure, than I have in all my 5. Can I even keep up with you?
Logan is so right because Mercutio says that. Romeo says, oh, single soul jest, solely singular for the singleness. That's when Mercutio goes, oh, Benvolio, my wits. Somebody shut this guy up.
It's like come between us, as in like, oh, he's gonna just tear me to pieces. Benvolio, break this fight up.
I would
have mercy.
Right? I feel like it could go either way. It could be dead serious. Funny enough, like he could be seriously like, wow, that was such a good joke, man. Or he could be like playing it very sarcastically. I like to see it both ways, like on stage and see how they play.
Yeah, I can't imagine Mercutio would willingly admit to being upstaged like that. It doesn't seem in character for him, where he has to be the wittiest of the witty people.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I would love to see this performed and see, because they see, no matter how you read it, it seems like they switch off playing who is the straight man. Because like in a lot of comic books, you get the dude who's reacting to the joke and the joke teller so that you can keep the joke going. You don't have two. When you have two, I guess these guys are both kind of telling jokes, but they're also explaining it as they go. So they seem to switch the role. I would love to see when it switches to like, Mercutio has the upper hand. He's telling the better joke, and then switches to Romeo. And when it's sarcastic, like when the joke becomes Romeo thinks that he's killing it with his joke that uses the word single 7 times, but not at all.
I also not to really harp on this. We did skip over Mercutio dragging Benvolio into a sex joke, because Benvolio is like, stop already with the sex jokes, and then he says, thou wouldst else have made thy tail large, as in like you would have just kept talking, but also made thy tail large, as in like got a boner. And it's, oh, thou art deceived, I would have made it short, for I was come to the whole depth of my tail, and meant indeed to occupy the argument no longer. So he's like, oh, well, no, joke's on you, my tail actually would have gotten small because I finished. It's startlingly graphic.
Yeah,
I think Benvolio is the true straight man in this scene. Like he gets a quip in there when they're all dragging the nurse, but otherwise he's just like, oh my fucking god, you guys.
But I do think in the sense of these are 3 late teens, early 20-something guys, of the one who's kind of an asshole egging the other ones on and getting them to act immature also, just is very teen boys.
Oh yeah, we've had conversations like this a lot, that you're fine, but when you get with your friends, like you amp each other up, and then things just get dumber and dumber and dumber.
There's nothing dumber than 2 men together.
2 or more men together.
One guy walks by a tree and it's whatever. 2 guys walk by a tree and it's like, I bet you I can climb that tree.
It's just a feedback loop of tomfoolery.
Yeah, I do think that helps this scene feel very accurate and very like modern. Like I could see, I mean, obviously not with this language, but pretty much exactly this happening with a group of teen boys. Like they're just like joking and telling like sex jokes, and like someone walks by and they're like, wow, like they're fat and whatever. Like it's accurate. Like that just reads like teenage boys. And you know, that's why it's so shocking when they come out with like, thou hast surely hit it, because it's just like, that can't possibly.
Yeah. Sometimes that's what the best part of reading classics is, actually when you get those little flashes where you're like, whoa, that still holds up. Like for me, it was the slip, because I was like, when he said, you know, when he said you gave us the counterfeit last night, I was like, oh, he means they gave him the slip. And then he says it, and I was like, whoa, Shakespeare actually read my mind. Like I thought that was gonna be the joke.
Like, you ditched us, bro.
Shakespeare's, I think, very good at having them talk about normal human things in his own, you know, Shakespearean way.
Mhm.
Yeah, I think the meaning of the word modern as we're using it, like we're using it to mean relatable, like I can understand exactly what is happening in this scene. I don't know if I would use I don't know if I would use the word modern to describe it that way, as being like, oh, only modern stories or mostly modern stories speak to the human experience or make things relatable to me. So I don't know if modernity is the benchmark, like the yardstick we should be measuring this by, since people have pretty much behaved the same way throughout all of history, even if the language makes it inaccessible. We really should not be too surprised that the human emotions and human behavior here are not.
I disagree. We should be surprised, because stuff from 400 years ago does not do this.
Well, I guess if we do need those other. I mean, technically, this is modern English at the start of the modern period, or the
That
early
too,
modern
yeah.
era.
Yeah. Technically early modern, but it feels a lot more antiquated.
But it feels modern.
Yeah. And it feels contemporary.
But do you guys
Yeah.
think there's some classics, there's some stuff that doesn't feel like it's actual humans? Like, I don't know if you've ever read Antigone, but I felt like that was a story about robots, because none of the characters in that felt like realistic people, at least compared to these ones.
Well,
Yeah,
I think
I mean,
I think part of it is just shifting expectations of what part of being a person art is supposed to depict. I mean, because you all know Devin has an art degree, so we've talked a lot about with medieval portraiture of a lot of people really like to rag on medieval depictions of people, largely because it doesn't show the same technical skill as Renaissance painting or late Roman painting. But there are lots of other elements of aspects of the portraiture that it's not like they couldn't have done it differently, but they didn't want to, in the sense of there's not natural perspective or size. It's like the most important person is bigger.
Yeah. Medieval art was definitely more allegorical in that the subtext and symbolism is very literal.
Yeah, or it's very common to make fun of. You can find lots of images where, like, the baby Jesus is breastfeeding and Mary's breasts are contorted into ludicrous positions. But that was because it was a almost universal principle that you could not have Jesus facing away from the viewer of a painting. He was supposed to always be like looking into your soul. So trying to have Mary look forward and Jesus look forward and somehow be breastfeeding is a logistical impossibility, and that's where you get these weird wonky paintings. But it's not like any of them were like, I have no idea what a baby or breast looks like. They're like,
that's not the most important thing. So I think part of what makes this feel modern to a reader, what makes it feel contemporary and relatable, is that the emphasis here is being placed on like the more like unsavory casual aspects of human behavior, like how people joke with each other and make dirty jokes when they're with their friends, as opposed to a more allegorical, symbolic, the best of humanity archetype, which was alternately popular at different points in history. So I think that's why it feels modern, that it reads a lot more contemporary. It's because it's focusing on a different aspect of humanity or bringing out certain
I think it's partly that. I think that's like part of what is surprising about it, is that it's like, oh, like, you know, you wouldn't expect, I mean, some people would not expect Shakespeare to write about this sort of topic. those people who haven't read Shakespeare. But I think when I say it feels modern, it's really, I think it's the way that it's written feels like, specific words aside, a real conversation. Now, when you read something like even the Iliad, as much as we like the Iliad, those don't read like real conversations most of the time, because they will speak for pages without getting interrupted. They won't have dialogue for a long time. It'll just be Nestor or whoever just like speaking at the reader through Achilles. And then Achilles would be like, thank you for that story. Here is my own. And that's just not how things work. But this works more like dialogue. And I think, you know, even if you were to read, I mean, like Oedipus Rex, the Greek tragedies are kind of the same. You know, you'll have someone literally wax poetic at the audience. Oh, this is so terrible, and just like monologue at you. And that doesn't quite read as like realistic or modern. But I think like it's just what is the artist's point? Like for the Greek tragedy, it was like, I want to make you feel emotional, and here's how I'm going to do it, with Medea crying on stage for 2 hours. With the Iliad, it's really telling the details of the war for various reasons. So like all these big diatribes and just like whatever, like these little diversions, that's just like, that's the point of the story. It's not really realism of a conversation. Whereas I think Shakespeare's point in this scene is to paint more or less a realistic conversation. And that is what we want in like film, for instance, today. Mostly we're looking for some aspect of realism, like artistic realism, but people talk more or less like they do in real life. And I think that is like, that's what I mean when I say it feels like modern.
Yeah, I agree completely with that, that it's more conversational, it's more casual, it's meant to depict a realistic interaction between people instead of like using a character as a mouthpiece for something more idealistic or something more abstract.
I think part of it is also that I think Shakespeare's contemporary society is much more similar to our society, and I think a lot of people think at first blush, and also more dissimilar from earlier English society than like in Shakespeare's time when this play came out. The English already had a colony in what is now the mainland United States. They were speaking a more or less contemporary form of English. Like, these are the words that he wrote, and they largely mean the same thing they do now. People lived in cities, they paid rent. A lot of, you know, English Parliament existed. A lot of the basic principles of law and the scientific method existed. Like, it feels now strange to be like, well, this is largely modern society, but it is compared to like the 1300s where you had knights and stuff. And part of that is you find lots of people say that the origin of the novel is when feudalism ended and you had the middle class rising up, and you had all these wealthy bourgeois people who had money and wanted to see art made about themselves and their lives and their daily existence instead of knights and kings and queens and things. And I mean, this is like smack dab in that period of, you have lots of people who have a day off from work, they have a couple farthings or pence, they want to go see a play about other people like them doing things that they can kind of relate to.
Maybe that's the better word then, instead of modernness for the benchmark, is relatability. Because an allegory isn't very relatable because it's so general and open to interpretation, and stuff like the Iliad is from a time so far removed, or from a culture so different from people reading it, that it's not, you can't really relate to, you know, all the details of the war and whatnot. So maybe that's it. Maybe that's the benchmark we're kind of looking for.
Yeah, and I think that it is surprising to people when they read Shakespeare, because like 400-500 years ago feels as far removed from us as the Iliad, but in reading it you realize a lot of these things, like how close in proximity and how similar this society is to ours, especially with the sex jokes.
Yeah, well, it's also a bit funny bringing the Iliad into it. Homer was about as far removed from the events of the Trojan War as we are from Shakespeare's time. So even for him, that was Homer being like, it was probably like this 300-400 years ago.
Yeah,
close enough.
Just some old guy.
And
Let me do my period piece, my costume drama about the
Yeah.
Trojan War.
It is telling that the pieces of Greek myth that are still very popular today are ones that are about concepts that are easier to understand. So like I brought up Oedipus Rex. I think I did, or else that was just in my head. But I think I
You
mentioned
did.
Oedipus Rex.
You
Okay,
You did.
great.
You're not.
You didn't bring it up today.
I brought up Oedipus Rex, Tina.
Did you?
No.
Okay.
You
I
did.
really okay, awesome, whatever. So anyway, somebody said the words Oedipus Rex.
It was you.
It was you.
Okay,
Just
whatever.
now.
It was on this podcast that you said Oedipus Rex.
Whatever.
And this is when
It's
it turns we're
about-
gaslighting you, and you actually brought up Oedipus at Colonus, the sequel.
I feel like the nurse, guys.
Yeah, I was gonna say roaster like the nurse.
Oh my god, did you just ask a question?
Okay, so in Oedipus Rex, spoilers, but there's like a guy who ends up killing his father and marrying his mother and having children with his mother. So
Oedipus.
when I say that, Oedipus, that's still
That's
gross.
the guy.
People don't like that today. That is yucky, and we don't like thinking about it. And it gives you this instant like disgust reaction. So I think that is why Oedipus Rex is still one of, if not the most well-known, most well-read Greek plays today. Because a lot of the other Greek plays are like, there's a play called The Trojan Women, and we just watch Hecuba cry about how everyone's destroying her town, but we don't get the context of the Trojan War. We don't know who any of these people she's talking about is, unless you read stuff like the Iliad. So if you were to just watch The Trojan Women, you'd be lost. Whereas if you go watch, I think it's just like, it's the relatable concept. Like the thought of a guy having sex with his mother grosses you out, no matter who you are. Like, so you can immediately kind of tap into what it's about.
It's not just that either. On Pornhub and Literotica, on all of these sites, like if you sort or filter them by their most popular category, every single time it's incest. So it's not just disgust that has made Oedipus Rex so popular. Like a modern day popular fetish, at least among these like online aggregate sites, seems to be incest porn.
Yeah, I'm actually.
My friend tells me.
I think.
Do you know?
Game of Thrones really opened some kind of unleashed some kind of evil genie from that bottle, but I think the Greeks were less chill with it. But I mean I agree with you. I mean I think what's the line? The past is a distant country. They do things differently there. I do think there are elements, especially for. I mean, even if we compare Shakespeare to some of his contemporaries, like Thomas Kidd or other big playwrights, we don't talk about them as much for a variety of reasons. I think we touched on at the start of this video series. But like, I mean, in the Greek plays, lots of them are based off of moral or religious concepts that don't make sense to us anymore. I think the whole line of Pelops and Atreus down through Orestes, like a lot of that doesn't have any real weight to us. I mean, most of the Oresteia is not nearly as common as, or even the other plays about Oedipus and Antigone and those. It's just not as popular because they don't resonate as much. But the idea of someone saying, I did something really gross and now the city is suffering, I feel really bad. We can all at least relate to the basic sense of, oh no, I just found out I did something I don't like. I am very upset.
Yes, that was kind of where I was going with that. Like so much is like not relatable, and then you have something where it's just like instant, yes, like I did not have sex with my mother, but I know what it feels like to do something awful that no one likes and like be suddenly shamed for that. Like everyone has been shamed at some point. And so yeah.
It makes you wonder how essential it is for art that is preserved to be relatable. Because if art is completely unrelatable to human people, do we still find it valuable enough to, by definition, it would be super valuable, but if we can't relate to it, would we consider it valuable?
I guess, and this is kind of like a kind of similar to the conversation we were having the other day about games and art of maybe, but I guess I'm not sure of any piece of art that has survived as in been passed down and not like dug up with archaeology that is not at least a little bit relatable, or we can't kind of get why people liked it. Like, I think anything that has survived to now has survived because there's something about it that we can at least kind of grok.
Grok.
I mean, like even with Gilgamesh, right? A lot of it seems a bit strange, but we can all get, you know, two bros broing around, and then one of them dies, and the other one gets really sad.
Two friends.
Yeah.
Two very good friends who wrestle just real hard and knock the walls down.
Historians will agree that they were very close.
Best,
Well, see-
best roommates.
I guess that one is a bit funny though, considering how much. I mean, Enkidu has sex with a woman for 7 days canonically to start the thing. It's very funny to then think of what else is euphemistic when it literally starts with 7 days nonstop. Weird poem. We're not here to discuss that. That might be a different video.
I think so.
Yeah.
It's a good one.
It's so hard to really predict what aspects of art will be evergreen and accessible for hundreds or thousands of years after the fact. Even the storytelling trend we have now of being like gritty and real and raw, it's hard to say whether that will resonate with people in the future. It's just what's popular and accessible now. It may not be. People may look at this and be like, this is weird. What the hell is with all the shaky cam? I can't see shit.
Or I guess an example kind of relevant, because we did A Christmas Carol. We almost did Gift of the Magi. But O. Henry in his time was incredibly popular as a story writer, the guy who wrote Gift of the Magi. But he's fallen out of fashion because what he's most famous for was the twist ending. Like, he would write a short story and then in the last 2 pages reveal some big twist that turns the story on its head. And that just like got him all kinds of acclaim when he was alive, but then that became standard. And nobody read O. Henry anymore, really. I mean, a lot of it was adapted to TV, but that's kind of thing.
There was a lot of fake O. Henry fans, but me?
Yeah, but I guess in his case, it's funny. People don't really read O. Henry stories that much anymore, although the prize for excellence in short fiction is named after him. But at the same time, his basic format of about 20 pages, and then in the last 2 pages, there's a big twist ending, is like 50% of TV shows, or at least cable shows from the 80s through early aughts.
Yeah.
So in some ways, I think things also live on. Yeah, like things live on even beyond. And in this case, we can attribute its popularity in American popular media to him, even if people don't read him.
Yeah, it's not the stories themselves. Sometimes it's the meta, it's the tools, it's the structure. Certainly scenes like this where you have 2 witty characters just bantering and entertaining the audience by being funny is definitely a staple of a lot of stories these days.
Yes, superhero movies do this all the time.
Oh my god.
There are tone problems. Everyone listen, not you guys, I mean everyone in the world. Banter is not funny if people are fighting for their lives. It's meant to be serious. Stop having this random witty banter.
Be more like Shakespeare and just have a whole scene dedicated to that.
You had to bring it to Iron Man. I was going to bring it to Rosencrantz and Guildenstern, which we all agreed we like.
I love that. Yeah, but yeah. Well, and that's based off Shakespeare. So the moral of
exactly,
Rosencrantz and Guildenstern are the Shakespeare of their thing.
Rosencrantz and Guildenstern are Shakespeare.
They are Shakespeare.
That's the meta sequel. The meta sequel.
I would say if there's a tone for this scene, it's literally Shakespeare going like this to his audience, and the audience dying because he does it so much. Literally, that they were like wheezing at this shit.
It's also funny. It's a bit of a. You can almost visualize mimetically Shakespeare and 2 of his actors sitting in a room and hashing this out of like, and what's the next dick joke they're gonna tell?
Yeah. I mean, we talk about art and the ideas and the themes, but I think an simple, essential, and often overlooked aspect of any art is that it be enjoyable, is that it be entertaining, that you get some enrichment out of experiencing it. So I don't think art should be devalued for being funny and entertaining and nothing else necessarily, even if it doesn't add too much to the story, even if it's kind of a plot cul-de-sac and nothing can happen while these characters are bantering. What Logan said like half an hour ago was absolutely right, in that the first thing this was meant to be was entertaining, like to give people a nice day out. And it's done very cleverly and very tightly, very succinctly, because Shakespeare's a good writer, and that's enough.
I think thou has most kindly hit it. It's like you should hit that like button.
Yes, could you most kindly hit that subscribe button?
Give us a like if your pump is well flowered.
Oh my god, I was like, surely pump his dick.
Also
Surely.
flowered.
Worn out thy pump? I mean,
Yeah.
I think that is probably a piece of it, but pump is like a dance shoe. Like
Yeah,
my
we still have
pumps.
pumps.
yeah, we got pumps.
Yeah.
I got my
Yeah.
pump.
I mean, pumps are still black tie formal shoes.
They're pumping.
Like if you like pumps.
Like if you got the goose.